It's a small, small world that belongs nowhere but Disneyland. In my experience, the world is larger than it's ever been, partly because of the illusion of smallness. Nearly every culture may draw upon the same pool of global pop cultural icons, but each one translates them into not just its own language, but its own context, its own history, its own tradition. That's how the world remains so gloriously unpredictable. In Iran, when I turned on the local English language TV station, it was to find the war in Syria turned into a war on Syria. I saw bookstores filled with the latest biography of Steve Jobs, but I couldn't imagine what his story might mean to these people very far from Cupertino. All the cool kids on the streets of Isfahan were piling into a place called Kansas Fried Chicken, their very own KFC, but of course it appealed to them in a way Colonel Sanders never could in Louisville. Tehran, as some of you know, is a sister city to Los Angeles. And of course, Los Angeles itself is now filled with people from Iran, to the point where some parts are actually called Tehrangeles, and a two-time mayor of Beverly Hills was from Iran. When you look at the jam-packed traffic in both places, the mountains veiled in smog, the late-model German cars cruising around huge villas rich with gardens, the subtropical foliage, you can see how much they share. And yet, the beauty of Iran, I came to feel, is the complexity of Iran, which is, of course, that its assumptions and values couldn't be more different from those I know in California. All day long, I would talk to my guide, and the more he spoke spellbindingly about every subject under the sun, the less I could tell where he stood on even the most basic aspects of religion or politics. In the evenings, I'd leave him behind and venture into shops where one person would be telling me about his love affairs in Perth, and another would be telling me about his family in Orange County, or maybe just expressing his impatience with the Ayatollahs. Often my clothes were quite similar to those of the people around me, but I don't think that began to make us the same person, or the world a homogeneous suburb. I'm of Hindu background, with parents from a country that's often sadly been at odds with its Islamic neighbor. I'm based in the US, which has been politically opposed to Tehran all my adult life, but I'd come here to learn about Shia Islam and about its notions of martyrdom, about how Iraq and Saddam Hussein look from next door, about how the US looks to somebody in the desert city of Yazd. After 16 days of crisscrossing the country, I couldn't say the Iranian position was right, but nor could I say it was wrong. So too with everything I heard once I got back to the US. I was liberated just a little from black and white thinking, or from seeing a foreign country or my own through two-dimensional stereotypes. When I returned to California, I tried to explain to my friends how what I'd seen in Iran was so different from what I'd imagined. And on the streets of Tehran, I hoped I might be able to remind the people I met, just with my presence, that a typical American today may be quite small, dark-skinned, and in fact very eager to learn about their country and their religion. Not at all what everybody expects. The success of a trip for me is measured by how many certainties can be replaced by questions, and how many ideas can give way to complex realities. We rightly speak of the urgency of protecting the natural environment, but a traveler is also one who tries very hard to respect the cultural environment by traveling to listen, not to lecture. I was thrilled to be shown the great past of Iran in its museums and sites such as Persepolis, but I got even more from seeing the constantly shifting present. I was treated across Iran to many superlative meals, but I knew I could get delectable Iranian food in Los Angeles. What I couldn't get so easily at home was the sight of laughing women in full chadors playing one-on-one basketball with their boyfriends. When I was a kid going to school by plane every few months, most of the passengers around me looked to be relatively privileged and were probably traveling in order to get something. Nowadays, on those same planes, the tourist beside me often comes from Bangalore or Chiang Mai, and many of the fellow passengers from Seattle are traveling not just to get something, but to give something back. They want not only to consume a foreign culture, but to produce something worthwhile, maybe to offer legal counsel to the people of Tibet, maybe to share the fruits of what they've learned about sex trafficking with the victims of that trade in Nepal, maybe to offer ideas for environmental protection to Beijing. Even if you're not going on such a practical mission, you can bring back from Iran or Cuba or Tibet nuances, details you could seldom get from the news. You can also remind the people you meet, many of whom cannot leave their country, what's beautiful about their culture and not to be found elsewhere. This is how tourism, which so often threatens culture, can move Balinese villagers to revive old dances, can inspire the craftspeople of Rajasthan to take fresh interest in their traditions. It's how my wife from Japan shows me what Californians really have to be proud about. Governments will always define themselves by drawing lines, but it's the nature of cultures and humans to reach across those very same boundaries. At the time I was in the Islamic Republic of Iran, it was in the middle of a decades-long dispute with the United States. Yet at the very same time, the single best-selling poet in the US for many years had been, of all things, an Islamic mystic, Rumi. And many of the very friendly and savvy Iranians I met knew much more about the West Wing than my friends in LA do. In an age of violent divisiveness, when it's easier than ever to be encircled by people who think and feel as you do, the value of travel, even if you're just going to the next state or inland from where you are, comes in being reminded of how very partial your vision is and how little it applies to other people. How can we contrive, as the English essayist G.K. Chesterton had it, to be at once astonished at the world and at home in it?